to the Humans vs. Retirement podcast with financial planner and retirement specialist Dan Haylett. In this podcast, Dan explores ways to help you overcome the behavioural, emotional and financial challenges of life after work. Join Dan for the journey where he will explore how our wonderful human brain will naturally fight against what it takes to live a happy, healthy and wealthy retirement. Dan will draw on years of expertise, experience and expert guests to solve the behavioural, emotional and financial challenges of life after work. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Humans vs. Retirement podcast. I'm your host, Dan Haylett, and today I am super excited to have a conversation all the way from the other side of the pond, not that far over the other side of the pond, from New York, with the founder of the Pearl Institute, the author of the brilliant Prime Cuts Substack newsletter, and someone who is going to share his knowledge and wisdom around helping people grow healthier, perform better, lead stronger lives, and make wiser decisions, and how all of that can apply to us when we are in our retirements. Dr. Phil Pearlman. Phil, a warm welcome to the Humans vs. Retirement podcast.
Dan, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Can't wait to have this conversation with you. We spoke a couple of weeks ago now, so I'm can't wait to get to some of the things that we talked about, because I know it's going to add so much value to the listeners here. Because I think, you know, one of those things, Phil, that we often end up focusing on when it comes to our retirement is the numbers. But actually, if you haven't got your health, you can't take advantage of them wonderful numbers that you may have been able to accumulate. So I can't wait for your take in this conversation. But I'd love for you just to share with the audience your journey to founding the Pearl Institute, writing the Prime Cuts newsletter, and kind of how you've got into where you are today.
Thank you so much, Dan. Again, you know, I've been in finance media, startups, VC for a long time, all in the financial arena. And for many, many years, I was not taking good care of myself. And I was drinking too much, eating the wrong things, putting all kinds of bad things in my body. And over the past 10 years or so, more efficiently and better over the past 5 years. But over the past 10 plus years, I've been trying to get myself healthy. And it's only over the last 5 years that I got really good at it. And I came out the other side. And one thing that I realized was that I wanted to help people go through, because I see a lot of people who are not healthy today. And as a matter of fact, if you look at charts of obesity and diabetes and heart disease and depression among adults in the US, the numbers are rising, and they're rising very quickly. And so something's off in our culture. And so as I was getting myself more healthy, a part of me came out that it had been dormant for a long time, and that is this helper part of me. Originally, as a matter of fact, the way that I got into finance originally was I became a psychologist and earned my doctorate in clinical psychology, and then started learning about behavioral economics way back in the day, before Kahneman won a Nobel Prize. As a matter of fact, back in the early aughts, and I met a hedge fund manager who invited me to join him. Because he was into sort of behavioral components of the market, and I got involved in finance originally that way. But along the way, I was taking, and that's very stressful. And along the way, I was taking poor and poor care of myself, and realized I needed to get away from that. And so now that helper part, so I got really healthy, crazy healthy. Now I'm like silly, and I got the helper part started to come back out. And so I decided to just completely get out of finance altogether. I was CMO at an asset management firm, and I left and I created the Pearl Institute, which is really focused on working with people who have their financial house in order. So, if health and wealth are two sides of the same coin, or they're Siamese twins, then, a lot of people have sort of the wealth thing going. Hey, I've saved a whole bunch of money, 529s, trusts and UTMAs and whatever. There's so many dizzies me. How about you get this other side in order, other side of the coin in order? Because you get to that point, it's your freedom phase in your life, and you have all the money in the world. You don't get a mulligan with your body. You don't get a do-over. So if you're in really poor health, 60, 65 years old, you have a problem. So that's my reason for being.
It's just such an under-educated part of this. Like you said, I think the journey that most people go through is that they don't only sacrifice their time to get wealth, they sacrifice their health to get wealth. So, long days, stressful days, stopping in a services, drinking the wrong thing, out for lunch with clients, out for beers with clients, and so I think, in order to get to the point, as you said, that you have this financial independence and financial freedom, not only have you sacrificed time, which people go, I want time. A lot of people I speak to go, I want my time back. I'm leaving the corporate jungle because I want to get my time back. I don't really hear people say, I want to leave the corporate jungle because I want to get healthy again. But that should be the foundational thing that people say, because then what you can then absolutely have the best chance of doing is taking advantage of the wealth that you have created and some of the sacrifices. But I think I suppose the thing that I want to talk with you about on this is that maybe we shouldn't just leave it until we get to 60, right? I think there's choices that we can make during our 40s and 50s as we're going up to make sure that we are in a great state of health as we enter into retirement.
The compound interest curve is a perfect metaphor. The earlier we start piling money away, the quicker we get to that part of the curve that begins to accelerate slope, where the hockey stick happens. And so what happens in the compounding interest curve, as many of the viewers know, is the first 8-9 years, it's a very flat curve. And then it really starts to hockey stick. And it's the exact same thing. There's so many parallels between health and wealth. It's crazy. All of the metaphors hold together from one to the other. And so this compound interest one is perfect. So it's never too late to start. Before I go into, it's better to start when you're young. It's never too late to start. I didn't stop drinking even until I was in my 50s. And I really was sort of getting a little bit healthier, but also battling myself that whole time. And it wasn't until, I was about 51 that it really, everything started swimming in the same direction. So it's never too late. However, the earlier you start, for all you youngsters out there who are watching this with the incredible foresight to be thinking about your future self, I applaud you, number one, because you have strong time perspective. That is a cognitive capacity. You have strong sense of time perspective. If you are out there and you're younger and you're planning for your future self, planning for your retirement, starting to do you're having young kids, starting to do the 529s, you got your 401k, you got your bing, bang, boom, and you start getting your health game in order younger, man, you're going to get older. You're going to know a lot about it. It's going to all be habits, and you're going to really have an advantage. You're going to have strong muscles when people your age are experiencing sarcopenia, which is like this age-related muscle loss. You're going to have strong bones. You're going to have a healthy metabolism. So I can't recommend it enough. But anyway, that, the sooner you start, the better, because you want to get to that part where you really start to see the benefits, which is going to take a little while to happen.
100% totally agree. I think one of the biggest things that I come across is I think people have this sense of fear, because I think there is some, and I want to get your sense on kind of health span versus lifespan as we get into this conversation and your take. But I think now more than ever, people are stepping away from a career to retire. Retirement does mean something very different to these people now. They're not sitting in, they are more active, and they want to be more active in their retirement. And they know that health is so important, but it's almost that kind of that they get that like paradox of fear. They get stuck. They don't know which way to turn. And so they end up doing nothing, right? If you've got these, and I think what's your take on trying to, take control of this? So if you're in your 50s and you're, thinking about stepping back from work, and you go, do you know what? Health is important. I've got grandchildren that I want to spend time with. I want to play some more golf, and I want to do some hiking, and I want to be active and travel more. This is not about standing on the stage and being a bodybuilder. This is kind of fundamental, foundational health things. What's your take on kind of, getting control of your time and having agency around making sure that you make these changes to enable you to have a really kind of happy, healthy retirement?
Well, you used the term fear when you were setting up your question. And I just want to come back to that because it is fundamental. We have, at different levels of consciousness, we are very fear. And as a matter of fact, another great finance analogy, because, fundamental, one of the fundamental rules of behavioral economics is loss aversion. And that's really just fear of losses. We don't want to lose what we have. And there's an evolutionary basis to that. It goes all the way back to when where we didn't have an abundance of food, where we had resource scarcity, our distant ancestors. So if they killed an animal, they had to protect that animal like crazy because they were going to eat that, and their people were going to eat that. And so we have the same thing. We have this fear. We fear getting old. We fear dying. We see our parents and grandparents, and it's deep inside of us. None of us want to die, right? And so it is fundamental, and it makes it difficult. And so how do we get past that? We also have other types of fear. We fear that we can't do it. I don't know where to begin. I don't know how. I've tried before. I have so many clients that come to me and I say to them, hey, have you lost weight before? Have you gotten healthy before? And they say, yeah, about 5 or 6 years ago, I lost about 40 pounds, but then I hurt my knee and then I gained back 50, and it's like this thing. So they fear not only loss in the distant future, but they also fear that they can't do it. And so what I would say there is that what you want to do is start very, very slowly. So, we live in this toxic culture where we have all of our priorities wrong. Like we were talking earlier about the rat race, and that is a part of our toxic culture that is just whack, right? We're hectic. We want more. We're busy out of our brains, and then we add more to it, and we're killing ourselves in that way. Another way that our culture is whack is that we're so hyper competitive, even with ourselves. So we go out there and we say, hey, we're going to go get healthy. New Year's is coming up. We make a New Year's resolution. We go out and we start doing CrossFit. And by February 1, we have injured ourselves. We're sitting back on the couch and we're eating Funyuns again, and our back hurts because we went out of the gate too hard and we lifted, 100 pounds one day. And then the next day we're trying to lift 105 pounds, and that works. And then the next day we go out and we try to lift 110, and then all of a sudden we get injured. So I would say start very, very slowly. All you have to do is move in the right direction, and inertia will play an incredible part. So I would begin, and I always talk. This is something I talk about very, very frequently, and it's something I practice what I preach. I went for a walk early this morning. Went for a 3-mile walk with my next door neighbor and the dog, and we walked around the neighborhood and we had a little chat, and it was lovely. And it's getting fall. It's getting to be fall, and the colors and everything. And just go for a walk. That is the place to start. You don't have to start by saying, hey, I'm going to go out and run a marathon, or I'm going to go do CrossFit, or I'm going to do some other huge. You don't have to worry about the intensity. That is another thing about our culture. We live in this intensity culture where we're being competitive is great, but where we're hyper competitive, we're too competitive for our own good. And so you just start very slowly. Go for a walk. The next thing I would say is begin eating real foods. I mean, I'm a high protein, low carb guy, but you don't even have to go there yet, right? You don't have to become a fundamental evangelist or whatever. You could just start by being, a Reform Jew, right? You're just like, hey, I'll go to synagogue every once in a while, and maybe I'll eat some matzah. You don't have to get crazy, right? You just start eating real foods, start eating a little less candy and pie, and then that gets you going in the right direction. Start eating eggs. Have a steak for dinner and don't eat anything afterwards. Have chicken. Cook at home. Just cooking at home is there's actually studies that show that people die sooner when they eat out more. Crazy, right? So just cook at home. So just start cooking at home, eat a little less cake and baked goods, and start taking walks in the morning. That's a great place to start, and it is sustainable.
Do you know what's really resonated with me there is that you said small steps, basic fundamental things. I don't like going to the gym is that excuse, right? I don't like the gym. Well, I mean, everyone can go for a walk, right? I mean, that's kind of, fundamental things that we can do. Have such monumental differences and compound, as you say, as you get on.
I just want to follow up with one other thing about that. And it goes back to what you said right at the beginning of the question. The fear of, and I'm talking about the fear of not being able to do it. Here's what happens. And this is where you also mentioned agency. And here's where the agency comes in. Gaining agency, people treat the chasm between knowing and doing as this mysterious thing. And it is kind of mysterious. We know what the right thing to do is, but we don't do it. We don't cross this chasm between knowing and doing. And one of the things that is creating that chasm is fear of not knowing, fear of thinking you can't do it. And so if you just start taking baby steps, if you just go for a walk a few times for a week, start at the very beginning. And then a month in, February comes and you're like, hey, I could do this. And all of a sudden you start gaining agency. You start gaining this self-confidence that you can do it. And it begets more. There's momentum, just like in price behavior, right? Again, a market metaphor. Just like price behavior has momentum over shorter time frames, our confidence has momentum. And so we say, hey, I went for a walk and actually it felt great. And I ate well, and it actually wasn't that hard. And then, hey, maybe I'll go for a little jog, 3 months later, maybe I'll go for a little jog, and you start learning a little bit about it. That's a key to that, to the agentic, it's an agentic key, to use some little fancy language on.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Do you know what's really, this is just me thinking on the fly here as well, right? I think we talk about having some sort of purpose in our retirement, but we can link purpose, we can link growth, we can link new skill acquisition with becoming healthier, right? You mentioned cooking at home. I think, why don't one of those things we do, everyone listening, if you're thinking about retirement, why don't one of those things you do is learn to cook? Go on a cooking course, go do evening school, what a wonderful thing to do in your retirement. Not only are you learning new skills, you're getting a new interest, you're creating a new tribe of friends, but you're actually doing something then that really impacts you and your spouse's or partner's or family's health, because you're learning to cook. And I think if you can double up on these things, right, a bit like, I don't know, you might want to go, and you've always loved boxing and you'd love to go to a boxing gym, and you think, oh, I've got time now, and you've watched it, and why not double down on this? Why not go, do you know what? I'm in a space that I can learn and acquire new skills, new knowledge, create new social networks, and do that from a point of view that this can actually aid your health as well with fitness and eating and cooking. That could be cool, right? That could be really cool.
You are actually shooting an arrow right here on me. You're hitting me really close to home, because I had that exact experience. I said to myself, I can go do something that I love as a vocation, and maybe even build a business around it, and just do something I love that becomes a part of that. And for you out there who maybe isn't going to build a business related to fitness, it's really very similar still, because the majority of you, maybe not every single one, but I'm willing to bet that 85% of the people watching this right now, when they were younger, loved to do some type of activity. We're part of our basic fundamental structure, right? Our build, psyche, genetics, whatever you want to call it, has physical movement involved. Whether it was you were a runner, or you played lacrosse, or you played tennis is a great one because you can continue to do that now, or you were a swimmer, or you love to bike, but you got away from it, or whatever. Maybe you love boxing and sparring. And there are a lot of people do like the, mixed martial arts now as a whole thing. In fact, I had one client who is he's incredible at that. And he's entering contests now in his 30s that he hadn't done it for years. And getting back to that thing and finding that part of you that is still in there, like 10-year-old Phil is still in this body. Like he's in there, and not only is he in there, but he is like amazing. Like he's the most real me that will ever be, because he was the me before college, taxes, children, parents getting sick, all of the things that make adulthood hard and or the things that moved us away from who we were in the first place. So, if you're out there and you played tennis and you're like, hey, I'd love to, maybe don't go out and play 5 sets tomorrow. Remember, you go slow before you get there, but you think to yourself, hey, you know what? A year from now, I'd like to really be able to go out there and really not just volley, but really play some tennis. And then you go for a walk, and it sets that course for compounding your health.
I think it's such fundamental things. Again, we're going to leave work and we're looking for social connections. I know the 85-year-old Harvard study that I've mentioned on this podcast before talks about the number one challenge of retirees is maintaining social connections. And actually it also says the number one reason why people are happy is because they've got social networks around them. It's not, so if we know that that's a thing that we're going to lose, guess what? There are clubs, sports clubs, activity clubs, walking clubs, flag football, walking football, all of this stuff that,
golf,
tennis,
there's so many of them. It's crazy.
Exactly. And you can create new social networks, new tribes of people while going and actually impacting your health. Same, I've got a client, actually, Andy, who was a guest on season 1 of the podcast. And one of his things that when I was working with him and Tina, his wife, about what they would really want to do in their retirement, one of Andy's things was to learn how to cook. And for his retirement gift, we got him a day's cooking course. And he went and learned a few dishes and stuff. Because one of his things is, I want to cook and be healthier. and he's learned how to cook, and he's doing more cooking, and he's learning all these new recipes. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to be able to do. And I think, again, one of those challenges is around having purpose. And so you can create new purpose through this. And I think it can't be underestimated, the impact of finding these things that can have on you as a human being. And Phil, I want to pick up on one thing that you said, and I'm sure you'll come back at me on this. I've said before to a lot of people that I think coming into retirement and stepping, again, let's redefine retirement. We're not saying that you stop work and stop life. Stepping back from the corporate jungle and having corporate world and giving yourself more time and space and freedom. I think that period of your life is, for the very first time since you were a child, the period that you can be curious and explore and get back some of those things. I've said that before, and I love when you said what you said. When I was in my teens, I played tennis this is not me, but this is kind of someone, when I was in my teens, I played tennis to a good level, golf to a good level, but I lost it because I had kids and I had this and career. But now, for the first time ever, since then, you've probably got the best opportunity to get 15-year-old Dan, 18-year-old Phil back in the game and go out and explore these things again.
Yeah, so I was going through this exact thing where I was like having this realization that 10-year-old Phil was inside me. As a matter of fact, I actually went back and found like a photo of myself from when I knew I was 10 years old. And that's like my spirit animal. Like I got that photo in my bedroom, like literally in a frame. And it reminds me, hey, that's me. When I was going through that realization at some level, I was reading this book. I remember we were down in the Keys and on vacation, and I was reading this book called, it wasn't called Buddhism for Dummies, but it was like Buddhism Made Simple. And like Buddhism is an Eastern religion, but we're Westerners. I mean, you're not a Westerner, but among Western culture, we like everything to be very, we like a bow tied around everything, right? We can't stand ambiguity. We can't stand paradoxes. We can't stand mystery. We want to know. And so I'm reading this book, Buddhism for Simpletons. It was a great book. I shouldn't poo-poo the name of it because it's really good. We'll put it in the notes because it's just a lovely book. And so I'm reading about enlightenment. There's a chapter or section about enlightenment. And I'm reading about it, and the author says, enlightenment isn't some mysterious thing. Remember, he's writing this book for simpleton Westerners who can't take paradoxes. And he says, enlightenment is not this, it's not this mysterious fancy thing. Enlightenment is just rediscovery. It's something you already knew. It's something that's already in there somewhere. And it's very similar to making the unconscious conscious, which, if you go back to like psychoanalysis, is the idea of psychoanalysis, or more contemporary, the cognitive behaviorists will say, becoming aware. Hey, you have to become aware that you have a problem before you can solve the problem. It's a similar thing there. And, so rediscovery, enlightenment isn't like this mysterious thing. It's just rediscovery. It's just bringing something that's already inside you, remembering it and bringing it back out. And so, if you're watching this and you used to play tennis, or you used to you used to be a cyclist or a runner, and you're like, wow, that's still that thing is still inside me. That's really all. So that's a profound, in my opinion, it's a very profound thing. It will always be a part of me. I will always talk about that. So I appreciate you asking. Actually, it was a sweet pitch. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just, it's really cool. I think it's, and I get that feedback from people, right? They take up hobbies and go back to things that they are, that they've always thought that it was always been that kind of nagging thing on their shoulder. I've kind of always wanted to go back to this thing and never really had time. And actually the joy that you see from people and you hear from them when they go back to their thing and they dedicate a bit more time to things that, that they're passionate about, which it's such a cool byproduct of figuring out who you want to be, what you want to be, and why you want to do it. I think as you go through that retirement bit, or that kind of, that retirement journey from leaving corporate world into, as you said, I love the phrase, the freedom phase of your life. I really want to. I want to touch on a couple of things with you around. One thing, there's a few things I want to go, and I'll probably go off in slightly different directions here. It might not flow as much as we want it, but I want to cover these things off while I've got you. I mentioned health span versus lifespan, and I think, that we're obviously living longer. It doesn't always necessarily mean that we're healthier longer, but we can obviously do something about that. But also it does mean that, that we do want to make sure that we can take advantage of our health and our life. If we are alive longer, we should want to try and put stuff in place to make sure that we're not just having 10 years of good health and then another 15 years of life that is, and that's a drag on healthcare, that's a drag on family, that's a drag on friends, that's obviously a drag on finances. So it's in our best interest to try and, I think close the gap between close the gap between health span and lifespan, make ourselves healthier for longer. What's your take on that?
Well, modern healthcare has gotten very good at charging money to keep people alive. And they do it to a fault. This is a controversial take. I'm just going to put it out there. They do it to a fault because, if you stay alive for 10 years, but you're non-functioning, the value of those 10 years is muted. I can't sugarcoat this. And I know it's a controversial take within the field of medical ethics, but it is a reality of in fact, everybody in their 40s, 50s, 60s sees this happening firsthand. Not everybody, but you have an uncle, you have a parent that you see have real severe illness, but they stay alive for a long time. And it's a sad thing and it's difficult. There's no easy answer. I'm not saying there is. But what we want to do, and I think this is just a natural, rational, we all want to stay alive as long as possible and healthy as long as possible. So, if I live to 100 and I stay healthy for 99 and a half of those years, and then I just go drop dead on my 100th birthday, yes, I'm good with that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Peter Attia had a great book out recently. He called it the Centenarian Olympics. You want to stay alive till you're 100 and you want to be healthy for as long as you can be up until that day that you drop dead. And it's a beautiful way to think about it. And the idea, so lifespan is how long you stay alive. Health span is how long you stay healthy for, how long you are able to be active, how long you're able to leave your home, you travel, do things that you really love to do, pick up your grandchildren, right? All of those types of things. And that's health span. So I want to prolong health span. I want to encourage people prolonging their health span. I think it goes hand in hand with the work that advisors do. I know that there's some advisors watching this right now, and I think that this is a very natural complement. As a matter of fact, I work with a lot of advisors, and that's kind of my forte and bread and butter, and probably how we connected. Because I think there's a very natural fit there. As a matter of fact, advisors have an important role, an incredibly important role. They are advisors. You think about that word for a minute. They are advising people. They are counseling people. They are hearing the fears and the dreams of people, and they are helping them, guide them through this. That's that whole, we're seeing this rise in the humanistic movement right now within the advisory space is so incredibly important because it's an empathic posture. It's meeting the client where they are. I can't stress this enough. One of the beautiful things about working with people in the advisory space is something I said before about that time perspective. Advisors have a very well-developed sense of time perspective. They're already doing that work with their clients. They're already thinking about that future client just within the domain of wealth, not within the domain of health. You know, I have a notebook sitting right on that shelf over there that says beach house on it. And I created that notebook with my wife and my advisor about 10 years ago, sitting in his office up in Tuxedo, and just like, hey, he said to me, well, where would you love to be? You know, when you reach that moment, where would you guys love? And we just looked at each other. My wife and we've already talked about it. And we said, well, we'd like to have a condo on the beach somewhere or a house on the beach somewhere. And that's kind of our, so it's the same exact thing. It's just being able to have that thought about the future self, because guess what? All of us, or most of us, I mean, there's going to be a couple people out here that get sick. There's going to be one or two maybe that get hit by a bus or whatever. But the vast majority of the people watching right now, whether you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 20s, 60s, you're going to reach that moment. So it could be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, tomorrow. But you're going to reach that moment when you turn that age, whatever it is, and you wake up that morning. And that morning will be as real as this morning was real. You wake up, you get out of bed, go into the bathroom, take a pee, do whatever else you do, pull some pants on, maybe step on a scale, brush your teeth, go downstairs and make yourself a coffee. That day will happen just as real in the future. And so advisors know that. They already know it within the wealth domain. This is a parallel track. This is the other side of the coin. This is the Siamese twin of that track. So I love working with advisors for that reason. And this also goes for anybody watching this who is not yet at retirement. So if you're younger, if you're in your 30s, if you're in your 40s and you're watching this, that day is going to come. You could close your eyes right now or when this is done, and imagine it in vivid detail. You're looking in the mirror. What do you look like? How do you feel? How does your body move? Who are you with? Where are you? All of those things you can vividly imagine. You could do that about your health too. And that day is coming. That day is as real.
I think leading really beautifully on from that, I mean, a lot of the numbers stuff that I do and we do as a business, we try and bake in evidence, right? So, we look at kind of, from when we invest clients' money, we want to invest it with, evidence. We don't want to do it on a whim or a hearsay or just because my mate down the pub told me that this was a really good thing that we should be doing. So, we invest with evidence. We plan with evidence as well. We know that there are things that happen with spending, and we know that there are things that that happen with taxes and all of that stuff, right? So you can plan with evidence. I also think, and that you can look at your health with evidence, right? The evidence does suggest, and you're much more qualified, Phil, than me at this, and I'd love for you to kind of pick up on it. But the evidence does suggest that our muscle mass and our bone density as we get older decreases. So we know this. So I think one of the things that we all need to get over when we go into our retirement is that weight training is for bodybuilders. We know that weight training, the evidence tells us that weight training in your 50s and 60s is so powerful and so good for you because it helps get over one of the biggest challenges as you get older around muscle mass and bone density. Fire away. Tell me what you think about that, because I think it's such an important point.
Right. So you're talking about science now. You're talking about evidence. You're talking about empirical data around, like you're talking about how we measure our wealth and how we all want to have a soft landing into our retirement, beautiful landing, no bumps, no skids, and then we reach the tarmac, and everybody claps and we're great. We all want that. We want the same exact thing. Again, it's perfectly parallel. We want the same exact thing in our health. And there are things that we know. We know that muscle mass is associated with living longer and health span, not just lifespan. We know that bone density is. We also know that our breathing efficiency is. How well we take oxygen out of the air into our lungs, from our lungs to our blood, from our blood to our muscles, and then our muscles can use that oxygen. So we know a bunch of things about living longer, right? The longer we keep our breathing efficiency high, and that fades too, that has a tendency to go down too. So we know a few things about our health. We also know that our body weight, specifically fat around the waist, the bad kind, there's good kinds of fat and bad kinds of fat. The bad kind of fat gathers around the waist, and it kind of gathers right here. And we want to stay lean. People who stay lean live longer and have a longer health span. So these are the things that we know. I would add one more, and that is how we feel, right? Do we feel great? I mean, that's you would think that's maybe more of a qualitative one, but I don't know. I happen to go by it a lot, and I know that people, I talk to people all the time, and I work with people, and they're doing something that's really, really in the positive direction, going in that positive direction, compounding. And I'll say to them, how do they feel? And they'll say, great. And I love when I hear that. That to me is the strongest data. So we know these things. And so what we want to do is we want to start really, really slow and just start heading in that right direction. And that, your muscle mass. And I want to softly correct you what you said. You said weight training. I think that's true. I think that's fine. But I want to soften that just a little bit and just say resistance training, because it doesn't have to be with weights.
No.
Push-ups, pull-ups, dips, calisthenics.
There's lots of the bands, isn't there, as well? Like the resistant bands.
The resistance bands are amazing.
Yeah.
You get some bands and you just start doing this with them, man. Forget it. I mean, unbelievably healthy for your back, for your chest, for your arms. You start doing push-ups. You hit your whole body. You just start doing body squats where you just bend down and get back up. You could just, by the way, anything I'm mentioning, you could just go to YouTube and how to body squats. And there's going to be like 100 videos. And usually the ones at the top are the best quality. But you just start doing that kind of stuff, body squats and push-ups. Body squats work almost your whole lower body and your core area. Push-ups work almost your whole upper body and your core area. That's a great place to begin, just with those two exercises, push-ups and body squats. You're going to get healthier doing those. You start walking, then maybe a month from now, 2 months from now, you say, hey, I'm just going to start doing push-ups and body squats. Do those for a couple months. Then, you're 3-4 months in, all of a sudden you're starting to feel your body start to change. Then, you go to YouTube and watch some videos, or you go to Prime Cuts, my own newsletter, and you look up how to get started strength training. I have a post just about that has 4 exercises on it. Or you go and buy a book. You look up best books for resistance training, and you're compounding. You're just getting stronger. And then the other thing about the breathing efficiency that I mentioned, and this is the other one, is you go from just those walks to maybe you jog a little bit for 100 yards during the walk, and then another 100 yards. And then pretty soon you're jogging. And it's this slow compounding curve, not the all at once. I do want to mention two other areas of health. You touched on one earlier. You mentioned that book of the 85-year study at Harvard. Great resource for anybody. I can't recommend that book enough. It's called The Good Life. Wadinger, who is the head of that program there, they've had 4 or 5 heads of it because it's gone on so long. It's a longitudinal study that's gone on for 85 years, measuring what makes people thrive, what makes people live longer. And they found that relationships, what you said about joining clubs, walking club, road runners is in every area. Can't recommend that enough. The one in my area is unbelievably good. Those types of things, connecting with other people. So you have aerobic health, the breathing thing. You have the muscle building, the resistance training. You have community and relationships. Get Wadinger's book, Good Life. It's if you do nothing else in this conversation that we're having, then go get that book and reading it. It's amazing. And then the fourth would be sleep. Sleep is incredibly important as well. You just had somebody on. I saw it. It was excellent. You just had I'm plugging your podcast now. You had an excellent.
It's a great conversation.
Who was that again?
Frances Taylor. So she's known here in the UK as the sleep fixer. So she's a sleep expert. And I think her conversation was brilliant around that. And actually, a bit like we've talked about, I don't think people realize the foundational benefits of a good night's sleep, right? Just
foundational benefits. Fantastic. Yeah. Also related to longevity as well. Mm-hmm. Mm. And cognitive health.
So I did want to go there for the next couple of minutes before we wrap up. But I think the last piece of this pie, this has been such a wonderful conversation. The last piece of this pie is cognitive, is brain, it is kind of all of this. I think one of the big fears that I see from people, and I've mentioned it a couple of times on previous episodes, and there is a trend, and it's a really sad trend of cognitive diseases, dementia, Alzheimer's. A lot of my clients' parents are getting Alzheimer's and they're getting dementia, and it's a struggle because, their children, my clients, are having to pick up the emotional and sometimes the financial tab on this for their parents, and it makes them scared. They're going, I don't want to get to that point, and I know that this could be a decline. The benefits of what we've talked about over the last 40 odd minutes on our ability for our brains to stay healthier, sharper, longer is, again, baked in every piece of research and evidence that you could ever find, right? So it's so important for our cognitive health and making sure that we don't hit decline, as quickly as what some unfortunate people that I've come across do.
Yeah, about 15 years ago, or even more now, closer to 16, when I really, really began this journey, and I was Mr. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. Like I was fighting myself, I was going for long walks and then I was drinking vodka, and I was going for long walks and then I was eating freaking, tasty cake and bad fried chicken from the Chinese joint up the street. And, 3 steps forward, sometimes 5 steps back. And when I started, even though I was going backwards and forwards, even though I was fighting myself, I was thinking about my children. We just had our first. This was 17 years ago, and I would take him for walks in the Bjorn. He was 3 months, having trouble sleeping, and I would walk him in the Bjorn, and he would sleep the whole time. And I walked all over Brooklyn. I know Brooklyn so well. I haven't lived there for 16 years, but I know it like the back of my hand because I walked everywhere. I walked down Fifth Avenue, all the way down Fifth Avenue. I walked all the way to Williamsburg. I walked Prospect Park. I walked the whole borough. And it wasn't until, and that was the impetus. However, fast forward 5, 6, 7 years, we move out to the suburbs. Our parents are aging, and I'm watching my dad slowly decay with Parkinson's. And then I'm watching my mother-in-law, who was the most lovely person. I cannot even tell you. She still fills this house with love. She's still to this day. I watched her go with Alzheimer's slowly over time. It was brutal. And so what you said was exactly correct. Everything is interconnected, right? So within this humanistic advisory movement that we're having, the human first or whatever they're calling it, it's great, by the way. I'm not, just because I don't know the proper name doesn't mean I'm poo-pooing it. It is a very holistic point of view. It believes in holism. And the idea of holism is that everything is interconnected and it's inseparable. And it's sort of like a triangle. You move one, you change one angle, the other two angles change. Change one side, the other two sides change. So everything is interconnected. And so when we move our bodies and when we eat the right foods, we are providing health to our brain. We are keeping our brain in good shape. And there is endless evidence in this regard. Running and brain activity, neuroplasticity. I could go on, but you don't have to know the intricacies of it. All you have to know is that the healthier you are, body, the healthier you will be, mind. And I've seen it with myself too. I was cursed. Not only was I, did I drink too much? This is a syndrome. There's a lot of people out there who have short attention spans. They are emotionally volatile, and they have this potential to be addicts. That syndrome was me in spades. And I'm even finding now that I'm much, much healthier, that I have the ability to focus and stay tuned in to something for longer periods of time. So I've seen it in my own brain, even as I'm aging. Can't recommend it enough. I did want to say one more thing because we're kind of circling around it, especially when you asked me about the evidence basis and the data basis. Here's a model for everyone, a way to think about this, that we are all scientists. And we are the chief scientist, and we are the sole subject of the most important and longitudinal, continuous scientific experiment that we will ever be a part of. And that is the me experiment. For me, it's the Phil Pearlman experiment. I am experimenting with myself. So everything I do, everything I put in my body, every walk I take, or every time I go for a run, or every time I go to the gym, or every time I laugh with my family over a dinner that I cooked, I note, I observe. I'm the scientist of that, but I'm also the subject. I observe how that made me feel, what my experience was. And if it was a positive experience, I repeat that behavior. If it was a negative experience, if I ate some milk or yogurt or cheese and didn't sit with me well, or I got an upset stomach, or I ate some nuts and all I wanted to do is eat more nuts, I take note of that too on the negative side, and I don't repeat that behavior.
I think that just fantastic advice. I love that model. I've noted that down. I think that's just something to take away, isn't it? What a great thing to take away from this. You are your own experiment. You experiment, but you are the reason why you need to make sure that you do the behaviors and the right things, right? It's kind of, again, it comes back to taking control. Phil, it's been, I think we could do another 54 minutes on this. So it's been such a wonderful conversation. I'd love for us to wrap this up. I've got 3 questions I'd love to ask you, if that's okay.
Yep.
And first thing that comes to mind, they don't have to be mega long answers. But what does Phil Pearlman's retirement look like in brackets?
Great question. Well, number one, when you were talking about like things you'd like to do when you retire, when I turn 60, right now I'm 56, and I have it already in my Google Calendar. When I turn 60, I'm going to become a bossa nova musician. So I'm getting one of those guitars that has the doesn't have the steel strings, like one of those classical kind of guitars that Gilberto played. And I'm learning Portuguese, and I am going to be a bossa nova musician. In addition to that, my wife and I want to be the grandparents where everybody comes to them. So if we have a house on the beach or a condo or whatever, the kids and the grandkids can always come to us. The door will always be open. We will always cook meals. We will always take them out. There will always be a pool. We just want to be like near where our kids are and crazy good grandparents. And we want to be near the water too, because there's just this natural pull for humans to be near the water and walking on the beach or walking around a lake. I want to feel great for as long as possible, right? I want to continue to run. I believe that I have another at least 10 years of improving some of my performance metrics. Like I was talking about, my breathing efficiency, I think could get better. I used to smoke. I used to smoke cigarettes. I used to smoke pot. I got making up to do. And I still think I have another, 5 to 10 years of actually improving my breathing efficiency. So I want to get better at that too. I want to enjoy times with my wife and kids more than anything. I want to cook a little bit. Okay, I'm not keeping it brief, so I'm stopped. That's the end of the answer for that. Because when you said keep it brief, the observer back here was like,
I think that one question is the one to not keep. I mean, it sounds such a joyful thing to do, right? What you said. I mean, it's just and actually, like, one observation briefly is that you're not talking about anything that this kind of dramatic out the way. Again, this is foundational family and time and purpose and passion and stuff that brings us joy. So absolutely wonderful. Have you got, or can you think of, your number one tip for the listeners? We've established, let's say for argument's sake, that you're in my shoes, and all of the money things taken care of, right? We know that we know there's enough. We know all of that stuff. But what would be your number one tip for that couple, that person, to live a happy, healthy, and wealthy retirement?
Stay close to your people. That's the Wadinger book. That's the Good Life book, the Harvard guy. Stay close to your people. Stay close to your people. Stay close. You know what? You have a friend that you haven't talked to in a long time and there was something weird. Call him. If he lives within a couple 100 miles, go drive and see him. Your family. Stay close with your fam. My mom lives down in Delray. I'm going to go visit her in next month. And I'm going to make sure to visit her often. And, my kids, my wife and kids, we have dinner just about every single night. Stay close to your people and go for a walk. Go for a walk almost every morning. So I got 2. I'm sorry. I couldn't, I couldn't hold to your rule.
Perfect.
And don't eat food, and eat real food. So I got 3. I'm so completely, I completely flubbed that one.
Well, they're 3 amazing tips, right? So everyone do that. Stay close to the family, go for walks, eat real food.
Yeah. Walking is a gateway drug to more movement.
Yeah, no, totally. And I suppose before we wrap, just some closing thoughts from you. Is there anything that you kind of feel like we've not covered, anything you want to add, and anything that's going on with Phil Pearlman and what you're doing over the next kind of few months, etc.?
Yeah, there's so much, So, okay, I'm going to try to keep it brief. I have notes of like 10 things that we didn't get to, but I could talk forever. But I am going to be launching a webinar. It's 10 weeks, an hour a week, bookended by 2 individual interviews with the participants. I'm calling it the Pearlman program, Crush 24 and Beyond, because this is focused on many people and I'm launching it into the new year. I've never done anything like this before. It's going to be, I'm putting my heart and soul into it. You can hear it in my voice when we talk about it. And I'm going to put, and what I want to do is I want to work with people so that they hit the new year and they start to make gains and they get on this trajectory to continue to get healthier. And they don't get injured in February, and they don't drop the ball in February, and they're not on the couch again eating Funyuns by March, and they just get better and better. And then guess what? They wake up in January 25 and they look at themselves in the mirror and they say, hey, now what are you going to get better at this year? Because you internalized this compounding improvement path. That's the thing. It's sticking the landing, not just, hey, 60-day abs or hey. So it's the Pearlman program. Haven't launched the marketing for it yet. The webpage is up, but it's not complete. And I haven't done any videos for it on social media. And I haven't done any, this is the first time I've ever talked about it publicly, as a matter of fact, but it's not even ready yet. And I already have people signed up. And as a matter of fact, Dan, I know you've signed up. And here's what I'd love to do with you. I'd love to have another conversation, whether on this podcast or just a rogue Phil Pearlman podcast, and have this discussion again, but me interview you after you've gone through the program and you're like, oh my God, this is what's happening to me right now. This is what's going on. I'm in the middle of making the change.
Let's do that. However that works, whether you take over as guest host of this podcast and you interview me based on that mid next year, and there's some accountability there for me, right? So we'll check in on it and do that. That would be absolutely amazing. I can be the other side of the mic, which is really cool. Dude,
we're doing it. By the way, for the audience, we were having this conversation before we started. We were just kind of getting into it, and he was like, "Sign me up." So anyway, if you'd like to get involved with that, it's 10 weeks, and then bookended with individual. It's all on Zoom. It's $1,000. You can reach me at on Twitter, P Pearlman on Twitter, or just find me on LinkedIn. Or you can just email me directly at ppearlman@gmail.com. It's PPEARLMAN @gmail.com. And it's actually filling up already, which is great. I didn't foresee that, but it is. So I don't have that much room. So if you'd like to get involved, you might want to do it before I launch the marketing for it in November.
I'll link all that into the show notes and everything.
Appreciate it. And I appreciate you asking too. I get the plug in.
Oh, no. It's look, I'm a big fan of what you do, and I think it's such an impactful, as you said, both sides of the coin. And I think your passion, your enthusiasm, your motivation, your knowledge, wisdom, skill, accountability. Everybody needs a Phil in their life. So I'm a big fan of trying to help people take advantage of your work, and subscribe to the Prime Cuts newsletter. It is absolutely brilliant. Phil, look, it's been an absolute pleasure and honor to have this conversation with you today. Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. It's been so cool.
Dan, again, thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it and love talking to you.
Perfect. And look, thank you once again for listening into the Humans versus Retirement podcast. The next time you hear me and Phil have a conversation, I'll be ramped, gone through his program, I can't wait for that. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have you with me today. Until next time, everyone, take care.
Thank you for listening to the Humans versus Retirement podcast. Subscribe to be notified when new episodes become available. We would love to have you along for the journey. If you like what you heard, then we would appreciate you taking a few minutes to leave us a review. And lastly, if you want to explore your retirement plans further, download our free 7-step retirement GPS toolkit linked in the show notes. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of TFP or Dan Haylett. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice, so please always seek the advice of professionals with any questions you may have regarding your retirement.